All right. Welcome everyone to Winning in the Great Resignation, Working for Jerks versus Enlightened Management. I want to set the stage. Tony and Brian, you confirmed with me that this is not a review of the Horrible Bosses movies, correct? This is the third in our 2022 Future of Work series, focusing on hybrid, flexible workspaces. And over the last 2 weeks, we've covered promoting employee engagement in the modern workplace with Noah and the office as a purpose-driven destination with Nick. Those recordings are available on our YouTube channel, and we'll send them. If anyone has a request for a direct link, just let us know. We'll send that to you via email. In this week's discussion, our panelists will focus on winning in the Great Resignation, working for jerks versus Enlightened Management. Again, just any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them later. We are recording. We will share the recording, slides, contact info after the event through an email. Our presentation today will be given by Tony Carnarsi, who is a recovering CPA. He utilizes knowledge he gathered as a CPA and a CFO to be a useful tool for business owners. He recognizes the value in putting together the plan and staying with it. And Brian Gorman, who is an International Coach Federation certified professional coach and change management guru. He brings decades of change experience and study into every coaching conversation. We'll start their presentation in a couple of minutes, but I want to first give our esteemed panel a couple of minutes to introduce themselves. So Nick, why don't we start with you? Noah, Christine.
Hey everybody, thanks Joseph. Thanks for joining. I'm Nick, CEO and co-founder of Kettle. Our platform helps companies sort of tackle all things return to office and hybrid work. We're available as a resource, as a thought partner to anybody that's out there struggling through these new challenges, and we have a strong passion for kind of helping put the pieces of the puzzle back together successfully.
Hello, everybody. Noah Pusey, CEO and co-founder of Ripple Analytics. We founded Ripple 6 years ago to address a need for gathering, analyzing, and using feedback from your talent. Our platform allows employees, managers, ownership to give and receive feedback constantly throughout the year so that you can make better, more informed, objective decisions. And what does that all result in? Stronger culture, higher rates of retention. It's nice to be on the panel. Really enjoy these weekly discussions on pertinent topics.
Thank you, Christine Petchwitz-Joannis, and I am with Puzzle Human Resources. We are a transformative, forward-thinking HR service. So we provide a team approach to solving your HR needs. And we truly are the human behind some of the great technology tools that we're speaking about today, in really helping business owners get through these changing times within the work-related environment. So again, Christine with Puzzle Human Resources, and to reiterate, Noah, it's been fun the last few weeks, so looking forward to Tony and Brian's discussion today.
And I'm Brian Gorman. I am the B side of the Doobie equation. Being successful in today's business environment requires focusing both on what you need to do and who you need to be. And given the world that has changed in the last 2 years, knowing what to do is not enough. You have to be and show up differently.
And I'm Tony Carnarsi, the first half of the Doobie Associates. I focus on the doing. As a recovering CPA, what gets me going is processes, procedures, structure, that monthly report card that business owners can use to guide their business to where they really want to take it. Brian and I are focused on being a 1-2 punch to help businesses in all areas. One of the things that we've done recently, just to give you an idea, is we are focused on the 4-day work week. We've joined forces with the 4-day week campaign. It's a global campaign, and we are going to be working with companies who signed up for the pilot program here in the US. Please feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to find out more information about that. Joseph, you're in charge. Can I get started here?
The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Great. Today, we're going to be talking about enlightened management. And even though, and one of the things I'd like to bring forth is that This is not new stuff, guys. This is not new at all. Okay. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the history, what I just mentioned, why the Great Resignation is taking place, jerks versus enlightened management. We had some fun with the title today, and some of your next steps. It's a little bit about history. Jack Welch, CEO of General Electric. He was named Industry Week's CEO of the decade for the 90s, and Fortune magazine called him the best manager of the 20th century. He said you need to measure three things: customer satisfaction, cash flow, and employee satisfaction. Jack said no company, small or large, can win over the long run without energized employees who believe in the mission and understand how to achieve it. Any company trying to compete must figure out a way to engage the mind of every employee. So before we move on to the next slide, just take a moment and ask yourself, if your employees serve your customers and clients, wouldn't you want them to be satisfied? How many of your employees believe in your mission and your company's mission? Think about that today. Okay. My favorite, the godfather of modern management, Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker has been around a long time, was around for a long time. And now I'm going to start bringing the history together. In the 50s, the more traditional workforce was less skilled than the modern worker today. And Peter wrote extensively about this. And the key to the older traditional workforce was that the worker served the system. Along with technological advances, workforce evolved. Most of the workforce is no longer just marching as ordered. This is known as the modern day workforce, or the knowledge worker. And Peter acknowledged this, that this was something that occurred while he was doing his consulting. Okay. He wrote this: it is actually more important today for organizations to pay close attention to the health and well-being of all their workers than it was 50 years ago. A knowledge-based workforce is qualitatively different from a less skilled one. For those of you who don't know Peter Drucker is, how long ago do you think he said that? He said that 20 years ago. And you know how old he was? He was 93. You are never too old to change as a leader. That's one thing I'd like to mention there, okay? And a couple other things from Peter, and he is my favorite. I'll be very honest with you. As a manager, your task is to enable a person to achieve and perform. Management is the key organ of your organization. And lastly, he said, they're not employees, they're people. So there was another guy in the 50s, last thing I promise, Douglas McGregor, came up with the XY management contrasting models. X is where the employees serve the system, as Peter mentioned earlier. It's more structured, hands-on. There are more rules to follow. It is more of a management versus employee approach. Heightened supervision is required. Why was it structured that way? Because the underlying assumptions of the people working for you, they were not motivated by the company's needs. They didn't care about the mission. They required significant and constant direction. Their only reward was to be compensated. It was more of a manager versus employee scenario. Then he created the whys. And here, again, agreeing with Drucker, the system serves the employee. Management with the employee, employees are viewed as assets. It's reduced direct supervision. People are willing to take more responsibility for their work and require less supervision. Now, the underlying assumptions are, and this is going to sound familiar, especially with the more modern day workforce that we're dealing with today. Employees are internally motivated and aligned with the goals of the organization. How many of you heard that about the millennials and the Gen Z workforce? They experience job satisfaction outside of just compensation. They're self-directed to do more for the company. And it's a better manager to employee relationship. So that's X and Y. Then Nick brought up Abraham Maslow last week, and I just want to throw this in there. He built on what McGregor was talking about, and he called it Management Z. Is it a coincidence? Or was Abraham Maslow looking into the future, knowing that Gen Z was coming and we had to do more for these people to get more from them. And lastly, just a little fun with the Bible, not that we're religious here. Do unto others as you would have them do unto to you. If that isn't early management advice, I don't know what is. And before I turn it over to Brian, I just want to ask you to ask yourself some questions. How many of your employees are ex-employees? How many of them are Ys? Are you an X-manager or are you a Y manager? And I guarantee you the answer is not black and white. This is certainly a gray area you may want to investigate further. Brian?
So the Great Resignation is underway. We are seeing record-breaking numbers of employees resigning month after month after month. Some of the data coming out of research in the last year from the Institute for Capital Productivity, 65% of employers expect at least a moderate talent exodus. According to an IBM study, 41% of workers are considering quitting or changing jobs this year. If your company, if your business, if your department loses 4 out of 10 workers, what is that going to mean for you? And I can tell you this from my decades of organizational change experience, the most capable people, those who are also most able to move through change successfully, experiencing the least level of disruption in their performance, they're the first ones out of the door if you're not handling the change correctly. And COVID and whatever the uncertainty right now of post-COVID is disruptive. So we're going to do a quick poll. And the question is, which of the following are elements of your organization's culture today? Please check all that apply.
Brian, let me know when you want me to close the poll.
Can you tell from participants to respondents
Yeah.
where we are,
Right.
Joseph?
Yeah. We're like 50%.
Okay, let's give it a little bit more.
Let's keep it there. Yeah.
We've got all the panelists that can't respond. So when we get up close to 30, we're probably about where we're gonna.
Give it another 3 or 4 seconds. There we go.
And can we get the results of that?
Just give us a second to take some notes, Joseph.
It's your show, gentlemen.
Okay. I'm going to kick us off again.
All right. Tony, you got everything?
Yes, thank you.
So what we included in that poll are exactly what's showing up over and over and over again as motivations for the Great Resolution, or the Great Resignation. People are looking for more flexible time, the hours they're working, the days they're working, all of those kinds of things, the ability to blend personal life and work life in ways that they have for the past 2 years when they were forced to in work from home situations. People are looking for more flexibility in where they work and where they live. They're not looking forward to hour and 2 hour commutes and traffic jams and standing on trains and buses and subways. People are looking for growth opportunities that really focus on building their skills and growing their careers. And we're going to go into each of these in a little bit more detail. They're looking for employers that care about their mental well-being as well as their physical well-being. They're looking for work, as Tony was describing before with Theory Z, that has meaning to them in their lives, not just meaning to their employers. They're looking for managers that balance empathy and accountability. And they're looking to feel like they belong in the workplace that their employer is providing. So let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail. Flexible time and schedule. 3 or 4 years ago, Tony and I were doing a presentation with a group of managing partners of New York City law firms. And one of the managers, and obviously they are not millennials at this point, one of the managers was bemoaning the fact that he's at his desk at 7 o'clock at night and he's the only one in the office. All of those young'uns have fled home to have dinner with their families, and he's having dinner at his desk. When we asked them, are they getting the work done? That didn't matter. That's Theory X. Tony and I did a podcast with Charlotte Lockhart not too long ago. Charlotte is one of the co-founders and CEO of the global 4-day workweek movement. Charlotte said, business leaders, business owners, you have to remember, we are borrowing time from people's lives. That's Theory Y. That's a very different perspective of the relationship between employer and employee. Flexible location. Last summer, the CEO of Goldman Sachs said everybody's coming back to the workplace. Work from home is an aberration. Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase said everybody's coming back to the workplace. People don't hustle when they're working from home. That's Theory X. And you all know from your experience, you hustle as much from home as you did, if not more, than when you were in the office. Theory Y, Tony and I have worked for years with the CEO of an international nonprofit that actually arose and grew as a virtual organization. Their CEO requires every employee to have dark time on their calendar. So they're working remotely, and she wants them offline when they can think and grow their ideas and develop their strategies and all of the important work that doesn't happen when you're just sitting staring at a computer screen. That's Theory Y. Theory X, career and skill development, climb that ladder. If you're in sales, you want to become a sales manager, then you want to become the division head of sales, and then you want to become the region head of sales. Not everybody wants that career path. We were in a networking group not many years ago with somebody who literally freaked out. He was an incredibly successful salesman. He got promoted to sales manager, and eventually they brought him back down into the role that he was capable of performing. Your employees today, yes, they may want to climb up in that vertical in which they're placed, but they also may want to go sideways from sales into finance or into human resources. And Theory Y management, those organizations that understand this desire of employees, they're building lattice work career paths. Tony.
Okay. And keep in mind, all the things that we're discussing today really are about people's well-being and their physical and mental health. There was a study done about a year ago where 1 in 5 global survey respondents said their employee didn't care about their work-life balance. How important is that to their physical and mental health? 54% said they were overworked. With the pandemic, How many more of your employees are working more due to shortened staffs? They're working at home. They're not managing their time well, or they're just doing too much. And the last number on that survey, 39% are exhausted. Do you know how your employees are doing? What effect do these statistics, these things that wear on them, how does that affect their mental health? Why should you care? Well, number one, from a bottom line perspective, if these people are serving your customers and they're not doing too well, what effect is that going to be on your customers? The second reason is what I said earlier. They're not just employees, they're people. How long do you want to have them with you? So some of the questions I would ask you is, what kind of resources do you offer when somebody has difficulties? What direction can you provide them? Have your managers, and now, especially in the remote environment, you've got managers managing people from afar. Have they been trained to identify when somebody's not looking well? And what structure or action steps have you provided them to take if they identify somebody who's having issues? Okay. We were on a phone call the other day, and just from a physical standpoint, our client asked the folks on the podcast, anybody for a group Peloton? And those are things that you can add as well. But optional is the key when you're talking about employees' time. The first step is really thinking about the people who work for you as people. That's it for that slide, Brian. Okay. Personalization of work. And, there's a term that's been all over the internet for the last year, or at least a couple of years. Alignment. Are your people aligned with what the company is aligned with? I'm going to give you an example of that. We were working with a financial advisor a couple of years ago, and he had plateaued with about 7 employees. And he shared with us his dreams, and they were grandiose, to say the least. Then we asked him, have you asked your employees what their dreams are? And he looked at us sort of incredulously, go, no, I've never done that. Well, what if you did, and you saw the excitement in their faces that we see in your face now? What would that mean for what they contribute to your business? Subsequent to that meeting, he met with each employee and asked them what they wanted. Think about it. If your employees are now aligned, if they believe serving you is going to serve them for their ultimate goal, how do you think they're going to perform? And just to give you an idea what the result was, that was when he had 7 employees. He now has 26 employees. He's a financial advisor. The person who works for him, who is my financial advisor, is the most amazing person I ever talk with every quarter, at the very least, more frequently. He is so engaged in helping me and listening to me. And that's because his boss listened to him. He asked the questions, he stopped, and he listened. That is part of that personalization process. How important is doing something right for the company important to me? Okay. On the left, you can guess it. That's an X manager. On the right, that's a Y manager. Okay. And just to give you an idea, and I'm going to share something with you. Most of the time, and I don't have the hard statistic on this, people don't quit their jobs. They quit their boss. Okay. That X manager is all about accountability and rules. And it's sort of like akin to a dictatorship. Now, an empathetic manager is somebody who cares. And you can't have all of one or the other. And again, I'm just going to point back to previously, you want to be in the middle. Because if you're too much empathetic, we like to say, that could create anarchy in the office. If you're too much of an X manager, accountability, it's a dictatorship. You need a clear combination of the two to get the most from your business. And that's why I wanted to bring out that XY management, because it really shows that there are admirable skills in each side but you need that balance. And that's what we're trying to talk about today. Brian, you are muted.
So I am. As we were talking about before, employees want to belong. And one of the big do I belong or not topics that has come up in the context of the whole pandemic is diversity, equity, inclusion. And diversity, equity, inclusion are really key foundation blocks for belonging. Did your organization go through the checklist? You know, we bought or created the training programs. We ran everybody through them. We hired a director of diversity. Or have you actually adjusted the culture of your organization so people feel that they belong? As you look forward and possibly look forward to a hybrid workplace where some people are in the office some of the time, some may be in the office all the time, and some may never be in. How are you going to architect that culture so that everybody feels that they are a member of that department, that division, that organization, that they belong? So the challenge really is, how do we get from here, wherever here is today for you, to there?
And Brian, before you go to the next slide, I just wanted to mention what I saw something in the poll. It seemed that a lot of companies, a majority, did buy into creating hybrid work environment and flexible schedules. But the personalization was kind of low, and so was that belonging. And keep in mind, to get your workers to do those things, those tools that you actually invest in, you've got to make sure they're working. You know, and that's really the key. We were on a workshop the other day, and somebody said, if you build it, they won't come because there are too many things to use. So I just want to, before we go to close this out, let's follow the KISS principle, folks. Keep it simple, because too many things will muddle the mix and you won't get the results that you want.
So the call to action, Brenda is going to put in the chat this URL. We have a page on our website regarding Enlightened Management. On that page, you can access an Enlightened Management assessment. Complete that, send it back to us, and we will Tony and I will get together with you for a 1-hour session to explore what those findings tell you and what your next steps might be. Also on that page, you can subscribe to the Enlightened Management newsletter, which is published weekly on LinkedIn, and our podcast, it's Doobie Time podcast, where we bring in people like Charlotte Lockhart, people like Banks Benitez, who brought his organization to a 4-day work week, people who have learned how to have difficult conversations with employees, how to blend work and life successfully in organizations. So remember, people, you'll find our contact information in the deck. When times are tough in business,
It's Doobie time. Folks, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Brian and Tony. A lot of good information there. Time for the panel to jump in. I wanted to kick it off with a question that you all could, answer, help set the tone a little bit. We'll go around the horn. Nick, if it's okay, we'll start with you, and then you could tap the next person. How about that? Do you have a personal example of a time when you worked for a jerk or person X, leader X? And if so, how did you deal with it? And what did you take away from that experience that the audience may learn from?
Well, that's a good question, Joseph. It's a tough one for me. I've been singing for my supper my entire career, so I'm gonna have to kick it back to some athletic days when I played for some difficult coaches. I think coaching and leading are quite similar in a lot of ways. And once upon a time, I was a not very good baseball player, but I played for some really good coaches. And I felt that the best coaches that I had were the ones that were able to motivate me to push myself to be the best I can be. And I think that that's sort of kind of balancing that X and Y that Brian was talking about. And the worst were the ones that, really took that motivation away. And I think that, there were some mean ones mixed in there. Lots of profanities. Christine, how about you?
Yeah, I've worked for some real winners being in sales organizations. There has been a clear difference in my career path of those that truly have helped me excel. And I think some of the key points that were made earlier and in previous discussions, right, were those managers that enabled you to learn and actually would give you a little bit of rope, right, to fall on your face and kind of learn from those experiences. I truly believe that we actually learn from failure quicker lessons than we do sometimes success, because we forget the success, but we never forget that failure. So I've worked for quite a few, and most of them actually ended up being escorted out of the organization at some point or another. But it took a little bit of time. And, one of the other things that the managers that embraced whatever was going on, a key word through this seminar has also been empathy. I will never forget, I was actually, expecting and didn't know that I was expecting, and was at an event and just didn't feel like having a cocktail because I was not feeling well, and was berated because I did not want to join in the festivities. And, so the empathy there for my choices throughout working with this one particular individual, as well as some others, just there was no empathy there and understanding where I was coming from. So circling back to many conversations, I think the empathy plays a huge role in working for a good manager versus working for a jerk. And it's a skill that some people have to practice. Oh, I get to pass it off. I'll pass it off to Noah. That's right. I forgot. I was waiting for you, Joseph.
Change it up a little bit.
So if I'm getting the question right, it's a jerk or a manager X in my professional career. I won't use any names, but I immediately thought of a boss of mine years ago, and it actually ties into feedback engagement. He had asked me, he wanted to do a weekly meeting, and he asked me to kind of poll the staff and find out what time, what day, what time would they prefer to meet. So of course, as anyone who has ever managed a team knows, it's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, sometime in the afternoon. So I went back to him and I shared that information, and he said, okay, well, we're going to do it at 8:30 on Monday. And so, so you want to get their feedback, but then as has been a theme throughout the last few webinars, so you gather the feedback and then you ignore the feedback, which is just a horrible exercise. And those people knew it. And how productive were those 8:30 in the morning Monday meetings? Zero. So that's my example. And to tack on to what Nick and Christine have said, the best boss I ever had, I've been on my own for almost 11 years, but the best boss I ever worked for empowered people and let them fall down and learn from their mistakes. Jack Welch also said, I think failures can be as important as successes because you learn from those failures. And when I left him, I unfortunately went to the ex-manager from that manager, which can make the transition even worse, because I had such a great respect for the first person and then just did not like the second.
No, that reminds me of the Edison quote, right? I didn't fail to create the light bulb 100 times. I learned what didn't work.
That's right.
Tag Noah. No, it's just tag one. Your favorite.
Brian, why don't you go, Brian?
Okay, I think the biggest jerk I worked for, I had been given, it was in one of those environments where there has to be a search committee for everything. And I was given the opportunity to bring on a entry-level professional position. The search committee came back after literally doing a nationwide search and recommended that my administrative assistant get promoted into that position. So I went in, I was excited because she was dynamite. And I told my boss that, and he said, no, you have to hire somebody else we don't promote clerical people into administrative positions here. Long story short, she filed a discrimination claim and I testified against my boss on her behalf. Because of my success in the position, he and his boss took me out to lunch and said, we can't fire you, but we can make your life hell. And they did. The good news is my boss's 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 boss was aware of the situation. And he brought me up to work directly for him, among other things, overseeing the hiring practices in his division of the organization after that. Tony?
And lastly, something about employee giving people feedback. I work for a public accounting firm, and you can imagine, and I'm going to take a swipe at CPAs. There was no management training, okay? And I was working for a partner, and we always had a little bit of a difficult relationship. There was no love there. But when I was leaving, he looked at me and he finally gave me some constructive criticism. He said, is it perfect yet? And I said, you know, on those jobs that you put me on with the stuff was a freaking mess. To think you could have told me that I was going a little too far and I should have just stopped. I said, you didn't tell me over the last 5 years. You decided to tell me when I'm saying goodbye. You're a turkey. So there's a jerk for you. I'd use his name, but I think I'd love to use his name, but I'm not.
Some good examples. Thank you for sharing some personal parts of your background. So you guys mentioned that people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. So what advice do you have for companies that can help them retain people if they may have, you know, X type of leaders in the organization? Brian or Tony? That was,
Oh, okay.
sorry.
Get rid of them. If you can't retrain them, get rid of them. Nick actually shared an article with us about a software company out in San Francisco. And one of their guiding principles is no jerks. We will interview, we will monitor behavior. And if you can't change that behavior, you don't belong here, because that type of behavior is contagious. And either you define your culture or it's going to define itself. So if you are really committed to the fact that you need enlightened management in your organization, then you can't continue to carry jerks.
And if I may add to that, the key is take that ex-manager and make it very clear that in order to save their job, they have to change, and give them the resources to change. Give them a deadline, and then that way they don't fire. You don't have to fire them. They'll fire themselves if they don't step up. Put the onus on them to save their job.
You mentioned the no jerks rule. So I forgot when it was, but companies shared their hiring playbook, for lack of a better term, and they had a NOAA, and they called it the NOAA rule, which is the no assholes in the workplace rule. So they were very clearly stating what their culture was like before you even like started the process with them. So you know, it's always stuck with me for years. I've had this in my head. Now I can't see someone whose name is Noah, no offense, but without thinking about it, but it's there. We have a question in the Q&A, so I'll read it to you guys and figure out who can answer this best. So how can a company offer flexibility in scheduling when it is limited by the times it operates, such as transportation, rail, airlines, or how can we be flexible with employees that are required to work in an operational role, such as a frontline supervisor, manager, etc.? So, Nick, you want to take a shot at that one? I know you're a fan of the flexible model.
Yeah. So I think a couple of things to answer this one. One is just really unpacking what an individual's role or a team's role is, and kind of putting some thought into what activities need to be done co-located with other people and what can be done remotely. and sort of team by team, position by position, sort of at least taking a proper process to that question. And then within that, what we think is you're best served with a tool, and can talk to you about ours, but won't hard sell you, but just talk to you about kind of how to operationalize ways to coordinate. Because if you think about flexibility and who's where and when, really you're talking about people, space, and time, and you need to reconfigure people, space, and time and how people get together. But on a team by team basis, to your point, they're very different. So if you have the right kind of orchestration tool to plan who's where, when, and why, it really helps streamline a lot of what will become the new working model, and also just the ability to communicate it clearly, because as hybrid and flexible work models emerge, some positions will have more flexibility than others. And I think it was either Tony O'Brien that was talking about DEI and B in the sense of belonging. And I think, looking through those lenses, kind of points to some stuff that I'm sure Christine deals with in her work of kind of how do you manage the inequalities that will start to bubble up here.
Christine, you want to add into it?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, right? Some of this stuff will have some cause and effect, right? There's always cause and effect. So even when we move to a flexible work environment, or if you provide some accommodations, there's sometimes going to be effects there. I think one of the best things that Nick just said, where is really unpack what can be done and what should be done in person together, from a management perspective, what can be done remotely. We also think of these roles as traditionally 40-hour plus work weeks, right? Is there an opportunity to divide this into potentially 2 part-time positions where you can create that flexibility? There's different things that you could put in place, allowing your employees to, for those retail operations, service operations, like were mentioned in the question, allowing no penalties, not penalizing employees for switching shifts if they need to, right? Allow your employees to have a flexible work environment. So if they need to go to a doctor, they're not taking their PT off. It's little things I think that businesses can do that might not have a tremendous detriment or change to the bottom line and how the business operates, but having new policies and procedures so that employees feel empowered and they have the opportunity to do some things that they need to do from a personal perspective without taking time off. They feel that they're making the choice around their schedules. And the next point that comes to, people, places, and space, and rethinking what the traditional work week looks like. It doesn't have to be a full-time, fully qualified, benefit qualified employee to have some of these roles. Perhaps it's a few managers for a particular division. So I think, again, it's just really evaluating what makes sense for your business and coordinating the people and the schedules. Again, that's a challenge and an effect of creating this environment, but there are tools out there that can help you make this practice achievable.
And if I can just add quickly, there are going to be jobs and industries that require different approaches. I mean, you can't run an airline without flight attendants. And if your flight attendants want to work remotely, I think the question was really about certain jobs that, how can you be flexible if the job itself doesn't allow for it? And people might have to pivot. And if you don't want to go into the office in a certain job capacity, then you might have to look for another job. Kind of akin to a manufacturing plant leaving Ohio and going to Texas and create, you can come with us or you can stay in Ohio and find a different job. So I think it's important that there will be some circumstances where you can try to be flexible, but the actual job description doesn't allow for it.
I think sorry, that I'll just Noah to highlight on that, right? Look at nurses in hospitals, right? You need nurses in hospitals 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? There's not an opportunity for nurses to do, there's probably a few things they could do at home, maybe some charting, but that's not going to happen. But yet in the hospital environment, they've successfully created these flexible work environments, right? You have nurses that work Monday through Friday, an 8-hour shift, normal operating hours. You have nurses that work 3-day shifts. You have nurses that work 2-day shifts. You have nurses that come in and work the overnight shift and wait till a morning shift, becomes available. So this is actually working in many high functioning industries. It's just not common practice in most, 9-to-5 corporate America jobs. But if you look at, those types of instances, right, there's opportunities for movement. You might not come in and have the exact shift or schedule you want. You have an opportunity to move into another shift, trade shifts, et cetera. So I just wanted to highlight that this concept isn't so unknown. Certain industries absolutely use it all the time and have been functioning for decades using these types of models.
Great point.
To close real quick on that, when you have workers asking to have more flexible schedule or something different, and you don't know how to do it, ask them to figure it out. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Solve your own problem. So we've talked in the last few sessions about how these changes have to start at the top, right? It's got to be top down. It's got to be everyone on board. But how can you go from the bottom up to make some of these, changes happen as well?
The first piece of that, Joseph, is if you don't have trust, it's not going to happen. If you have trust, then ask again, follow, exactly what Tony said before. Ask employees what's important to them. What do they need to succeed? What gets them up and brings them to their desk in the morning? How can you align that with what you need from them in order to get that quality, that productivity, that retention, that passion for the mission of your organization? Listen to your employees.
So Brian, I'm going to use that as a segue to Noah. So Noah's, talked a lot about analytics. And I imagine he probably has some ideas on how to listen to employees as it relates to some of these issues. So Noah, maybe talk a little bit about how you measure these things.
Sure. I'm a huge proponent of feedback, asking for it, getting it, analyzing it, and using it. So if you're asking your junior people for their input on solutions to problems, whether it's flexible schedule or anything else in the workplace, and you gather that feedback and then you don't use it, then you're damaging your company more than if you don't ask for it in the first place. Ripple has a platform that gathers the feedback, but you need managers that appreciate the importance of acting on that feedback, even if it's not something you're comfortable with. We've talked a few times about the traditional approach to things. Is it traditional and working, or are you doing it because it's always been done that way? And really pivoting on using information to arrive at solutions. And if it's driven by your junior people, even better, because they'll respect you more and probably listen to what you have to offer to the equation.
Another quick question. Does adapting a new workplace model, flexibility ranked pretty high in that chart, make you an enlightened employee? I'm assuming there's a lot more to it than just a change in schedule. So, I know we've been talking a lot about hybrid, flexible, changing the work environment. You guys just spoke a lot about the culture, the message, the environment, and leadership. So maybe just highlight, from your points of view, Tony or Brian.
Now, your question is, how do you become an enlightened employee?
I'm saying it's more than just, creating a flexible, like just saying, okay, I'm gonna listen and we're going to create a, Monday to Thursday office and Friday work from home or whatever it is. I'm assuming from your presentation that there is a lot more to it, right? Can you just elaborate on, it's not one of those 6 or 7 things, correct or incorrect?
It's a common, go ahead, Brian, you want to start? Okay. It's a combination. And again, I kind of alluded it to earlier. You could build it, but if you don't, and Noah just said it, if you're going to get feedback and not do anything with it, and it's the same thing. If you're going to put these things in place, you've got to stick to it. And the key is really if you as a leader are going to stick to it, measure as you go along your productivity and your results. Create those, besides employee direct feedback, go back to your traditional stuff. How's our productivity? Are our customers happy? And if you see as a leader that your people are still doing it and doing it well with increased flexibility, then you're doing it right. So I think that's one key to make it work, is to see the results, because then you see the rewards. and then you continue with it. If you do it with half an effort and you don't see the results, it's going to fail. So number one, you've got to go all in and give it a trial period, 90 days, 180 days, but you've got to give yourself enough time to see if it works. And if it starts to work, then you will want to keep it.
Anyone else want to add to that? Brian?
Yeah, I'll build on that. And this is counsel that we offer and that we've heard over and over again from the 4-day work week people. But folks, it applies. It applies in every situation. If you're sitting at the top, if you're sitting in the middle of the organization, you don't get what it takes to make it work down on the factory floor, down on the front lines of customer support, et cetera. You need to set the tone. And then you need to listen to your employees and work with them to find the ways to make this work. And you're not going to get it right. You're not going to get it 100% right the first time. This is an experiment for all of us.
Gotta take
Learn
that
from
first
those
step.
mistakes. Take that
Yeah.
first step.
So I know you guys shared the link to your site where you have some resources. If anyone else, I'll open this up to anyone. What tools or resources would you guys recommend to our audience today who want to become a more enlightened leader? Books, webinars, whatever you think. Brian, you look deep in thought.
The panelists on here offer tools. Nick, Christine, Noah, and when you invest in a tool, use it. So right away, Nick and Noah can help greatly with that. As far as other tools, feel free to reach out to us and we can give you different recommendations based on where you are and what you're exactly looking for, because there's so many out there and it could be very confusing. But from a tools perspective, I'm looking at the panelists.
Any books that you guys would recommend or people to follow?
I've got a
right
go
now.
ahead. Go ahead,
21
Chris.
Irrefutable Laws of Leadership is one of the ones that I'm rereading. So that's a good book that I recommend that everybody partakes in if you're a leader. It gives you some really good basics, and then working with Tony and Brian and enhance on those basics.
I read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the founder and I think he's CEO emeritus or whatever at Nike. And really, you think about how you arrive at success. It's usually not an easy trail. And I think reading that book kind of gives you a perspective. Yeah, is he a multi-billionaire now? Sure, but there were a lot of bumps along the way that are okay. And dealing with the current environment and the Great Resignation, it's a bump. It's a big bump, but adapt and use tools that are out there. Ripple's there. I mean, Nick, Tony, Brian, Christine. We'll hear more about Christine next week. But use the tools and redefine what traditional is. But that's a book I'd recommend to anyone. And it's very interesting to see what he went through over 40 plus years at Nike.
Excellent.
I would put two out there real quick, Joseph. Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown, on how to get rid of all that stuff that takes up time and doesn't add value. And then Effortless, Make It Easier to Do What Matters Most by Greg McKeown as well.
Cool. Appreciate those recommendations. So we started this conversation, we're going around and talking about the jerk side of things. Let's end this call with enlightened leadership tips. So we'll go around and Brian, maybe we'll start with you and you can tag the next person. What would be your final thought on enlightened leadership you want everyone to leave with?
Look at what you have learned along your path. What has worked to excite your passion and what has worked to dampen your passion, and become the kind of leader you want to have. And I will tag Nick.
Well, you know, I'm the hybrid work guy, so I'm always kind of thinking about the new challenges that leadership is facing with sort of no playbook. And I think some of the themes that Brian and Tony hit on today around focusing on people, not employees, and their lives that have changed in terms of work-life balance, work lifestyle, and really kind of thinking more about that why concept of enabling self-organization. Hybrid's a mess, and I think that the kind of letting the end user team level sort it through is a good solve to a pretty complex set of challenges that a lot of leaders are facing. And I think it's a fairly enlightened point of view if you can head into it that way. How about you, Noah?
I would say, listen, as enlightened leaders, listen, listen and act. If it's a day-to-day thing, you don't necessarily have to ask everyone their opinion about everything. But when it's an organizational wide or industry or now global wide issue, listen to your people. You hired them for a reason. And if you're not going to listen to the people, then you probably hired the wrong people.
If I may.
Christine.
Oh,
Sorry.
no, if I may, I just want to follow up what you just said. If you're not going to listen to your people, it might not be your people. It might be you. And you need to
Fair
take
enough.
a good hard look at yourself, because number one, if you're surrounded by people you don't want to listen to, whose fault is that? If you're not listening, is it because you don't want to listen? Take a look at yourself as a manager and a leader. I had to just follow you on that, the way you said that. Sorry to interrupt you, Christine.
No, I actually, that's a great point. And no, I love it too, right? Surround to that point, right? You should surround yourself with people on your team that have skill sets and abilities that you don't have, right? So that's why you have a team. You want to have diverse thought within your organization and in your team. So listen to them, understand their whys when they're asking for certain things. I'll go back to that keyword empathy. As a leader, I think today more than ever, it's important that businesses and business owners and leaders practice that and understand what that truly means. And be genuine, right? I think we're learning to cut through some of the crap of being a leader. And if you're truly genuine and you truly are coming from a place of, what we say, in our organization is we're going to trust and then we're going to verify versus mistrust, right? With verification. I think those are some key takeaways to the enlightened leaders. And then again, everything, if you ask for feedback, explain if you're not going to act on it, why, right? Like we don't have to report back to our employees for every single decision, but if we are asking for feedback, take some consideration and act on it one way or another, or explain business reasons why certain things aren't feasible. I think that those are some of the key things to enlighten leadership outside of some of the other discussions we had today.
Excellent. Great conversation as always, guys. I thank Tony and Brian for your presentation, the rest of the panel for your insights and time, everyone for registering and showing up, Brenda for your help on all the administrative stuff. Join us next week, February 2nd, 2 p.m. Eastern, when Christine will present the human and human resources, what modern HR will look like in 2022. Reminder, we will send out the slides, the recording, contact info, and a link to the Brian and Tony's page, so you can get there again. Until next week, thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.